Most people think you need a new engine to get real power out of your Ford. You don't. What you need are the tricks that most mechanics won't admit they use. I'm RJ. I've worked on Fords for over 20 years. Old Rangers, Super Duty trucks, brand new Mustangs, you name it. In that time, I've seen how small changes can turn a tired engine into a powerhouse. Today I'm showing you 10 illegal Ford tricks that some tuners swear by. They can push your engine harder, smoother, and longer, but only if you know what you're doing. They're risky, they're controversial, but they work. Let me start with one of the most common yet highly illegal tricks, which is to remove your catalytic converter. Some of my Ford customers ask me whether removing or gutting the factory catalytic converter, or the CAT, on engines like the 3.5-liter EcoBoost V6 or the 5.0-liter Coyote V8 makes a difference. Well, this would theoretically improve your exhaust flow, increase horsepower, get a louder note, and achieve a faster turbo spool. Once you pull the CAT out and replace it with a straight pipe or test pipe, you can get a quicker throttle response. You should know that this mostly works in older Fords or highly restricted setups. Also, if your CAT is extremely clogged or damaged, removing it will reduce back pressure even more. For instance, if the CAT on a turbo F-150 is failing, replacing it with a new, legal one is the correct fix. Some people illegally remove it, which may show a performance improvement. But this isn't as easy as it seems. The factory exhaust and emission systems for the Ford is tuned for the converter's presence, the O2 sensors, and the air-fuel map. If you remove the CAT, it will throw off all the sensors. I've seen many check engine light nightmares on Fords where the driver removed the CAT but skipped all the calibrations. And let's not forget the legal risk. In the US, removing a catalytic converter from a vehicle that originally came with one is illegal under the Clean Air Act. You could face hefty penalties and failed emission tests. Reputable mechanics won't help you remove your CAT and recalibrate your vehicle. If you somehow find a mechanic who will perform this illegal act, it'll cost a few $100s in parts and labor. But if you don't do it right, and it causes sensor faults or turbo damage, or if you get in trouble with the law, you might spend thousands in fines alone. This is a high-risk, illegal modification. A much smarter and illegal recommendation is upgrading to a high-flow CAT or tuning your system properly. Number 2. Remove the resonator and muffler. With over 20 years of experience working on Fords, I have seen people try to improve their vehicle's performance by removing the resonator and muffler. In this mod, you remove or bypass your Ford's factory muffler and resonator. This especially appeals to performance truck owners of the Ford F-150 or Ford Mustang. Then you can replace them with straight pipe or large diameter exhaust tubing. The idea is that once you remove these flow-restricting parts, you reduce back pressure, and this lets exhaust gases exit faster and improves the throttle response and horsepower. With fewer restrictions downstream of the engine, exhaust gases escape more freely. On turbo models like EcoBoost Fords, this mod can help the turbo spool a little faster or reduce any exhaust heat buildup. On naturally aspirated V8s like the Coyote, you might get a freer breathing exhaust feel. Gains might be in the 5 to 15 horsepower range as long as you get it right. But this is 50-50, as some of my customers didn't have a major horsepower boost after getting this modification. Aside from not getting the expected power gains, some customers came in after this upgrade because their sensors were throwing codes or they had drivability issues. That's why you need to match the rest of the system, like the headers, mid-pipe, and tuning. Also, removing your muffler and resonator can make your vehicle exceed legal noise limits. This is a violation of state and local laws, not federal emissions law, but it can still get you ticketed. It can also void your warranty, so don't expect any support from Ford again. Number 3 is also an exhaust modification that does wonders. I want to discuss modifying the straight pipe exhaust with electronic bypass valves. This comes with a major upside that would boost your Ford engine performance. On your Ford, like a 3.5-liter EcoBoost V6, 5.0-liter Coyote V8, or a big truck engine, instead of using the factory muffler and resonator setup that always flows through one path, you can install electronic bypass valves into the exhaust system. In street mode, the bypass valves keep the muffler and resonator engaged so that the car complies with noise laws for everyday driving. Then, when you hit the track or want maximum flow, you open the valves and the exhaust bypasses the muffler and resonator and becomes a near straight pipe path. This modification will reduce the back pressure when it matters, and the primary benefit is a much more aggressive sound. Any horsepower gains are typically minimal, usually in the 5 to 15 horsepower range. On V8s like the Coyote, this modification will give a broader power peak, more aggressive sound, and slightly better throttle response. But let me just get this out of the way. You should tune the oxygen sensors when making this modification to prevent any problems with the upgrade, and be aware that using track mode on public roads is likely to violate the noise ordinances. My number 4 trick for your Ford might be illegal, but it will also dramatically improve your engine's performance. This is to tune your ECU. You can have the engine control unit of your Ford reflashed with aftermarket software, as this affects how the engine manages fuel, ignition timing, and boost. Some aggressive delete tunes disable or modify emission systems like EGR, catalytic monitoring, or O2 sensor logic, allowing the engine to run more aggressively. By adjusting the ECU map, you can raise boost levels, shift the timing curves, enrich the fuel mixture, open the throttle sooner, and tighten up responses. For a tuned EcoBoost Ford that has already upgraded the intake, exhaust, and intercooler, tuning the ECU would unlock up to 50 extra horsepower or a better throttle feel. On naturally aspirated Fords like the Coyote V8, you might shift the power band higher, get a sharper response, and an improved rev limit. You can also take it a step further and tune for high-octane race fuel or ethanol blends like E85. These fuels allow for even more aggressive tuning and boost safely, and in some turbo setups, you can see performance increases of 25 to 35%, with even higher gains possible on heavily modified engines. But some Fords have come into the shop with melted pistons, turbo failure, or pushed rods because someone loaded a tune without actually upgrading the supporting hardware or using the correct fuel. So if you decide to tune the ECU, you should make sure it's done carefully. Also, in the US, altering the ECU to disable emissions control is illegal under the Clean Air Act. The Environmental Protection Agency has taken action against tuning companies that are selling delete tunes. And if your Ford engine or transmission blows after tuning, you won't be covered by warranty. If you decide to get a custom ECU tune, it might cost about $1,000 depending on the Ford model and supporting upgrades. But if you don't do it right, and the tune causes major engine or turbo failure, you could be looking at over $6,000. At number 5, let's talk about the cold air intake. On its own, slapping on a cold air intake does very little. But to get the most out of it, you need an ECU tune to properly calibrate for the increased airflow. This often involves modifying the mass airflow (MAF) sensor calibration, a trick that itself skirts legality because of the mod. The idea is that by relocating the air filter outside the hot engine bay and changing the pipe routing, you lower intake air temperatures and restriction. But without a proper tune to adjust the MAF scaling, the ECU doesn't know how to handle the new airflow, leading to a rough idle or sensor faults. When paired correctly with a tune, however, your Ford's engine will breathe easier, spool the turbo faster on EcoBoost models, and flow more air for high-rev, naturally aspirated V8s. I've seen several customers gain up to 25 horsepower after this combined mod. Let me mention the legal risk. It's important to know that adjusting the MAF calibration itself is not inherently illegal. However, if the tune disables emission system monitors, like for the catalytic converter, that is illegal. You can check your state to see if it's illegal to tamper with these systems. Between the intake parts and the essential professional tuning, you might be looking at $800 to $1,300. But if your mechanic does a bad job, you could spend over $100 more just fixing the sensors and engine management faults. Still, if you have a turbo EcoBoost or tuned V8, you would definitely benefit from this combination. If you think this is helpful, hit that like button. It helps the channel a lot. At number 6, I usually caution some of my customers who modify their fuel system return line to get better performance. This is especially for Ford owners who drive turbo diesels, such as the 6.0-liter Power Stroke diesel in 2004 through 2007 F-250s, 350s, or even high-output gasoline Fords or high-flow gas engines. You can install a modified fuel return style line. The idea is that if you bypass or upgrade the stock return fuel setup, the engine will get more consistent fuel pressure and less fuel deadheading in the rail. With better pressure, you achieve better performance and response. If your Ford's factory fuel system is near its limit, especially after it's been tuned or boosted, it's a good idea to upgrade the return line, as this will maintain a stronger fuel pressure under load, reduce pump heating, and help the injectors perform more consistently. In one instance, I've done this on a turbo Ford that was tuned to 450 to 500 horsepower, and the upgraded return setup helped stabilize the fuel pressure under wide-open throttle. But some of my customers tried to do a return line mod but ignored the fuel vapor and emissions system, causing them to end up with fuel leaks or pump failures. So you should get this done by an expert instead of trying to modify it yourself. You also have to look at the practical and warranty risks. Modifying the fuel system is a major risk if done incorrectly, and is also a common cause of workshop fires. While not a direct violation of the Clean Air Act like removing a cat, it can still make your vehicle non-compliant with safety standards. It might also be hard to buy special fuel return adapters. Also, if you modify your Ford's return line, you can forget about being covered by warranty if you have a future problem. So, if your Ford is heavily modified or under heavy load, a fuel return line upgrade will make sense, but it's definitely not plug and play, and you should make sure you do it right to avoid causing expensive repair. Number 7. Remove the variable valve timing. Many modern Fords with the 5.0-liter Coyote V8 or the 3.5-liter EcoBoost with Ford's TI VCT system come with a variable valve timing or VVT system. That takes me to my number 7 trick that might be illegal but will still make your Ford's engine performance better. The VVT can change camshaft timing for better low-end torque, improved efficiency, and emissions control. But what you can do is disable or delete the VVT system. If you lock the cam phasers into a fixed position, remove the VVT solenoids, or install fixed cam gears, the timing will no longer change dynamically. When you simplify the engine and remove this emission gear, it allows for more aggressive cam profiles, and you can gain more high RPM power or reliability under racing conditions. You can raise the red line and avoid any VVT phaser failures. When you remove the VVT on your Ford, you can force the engine to always run a fixed cam timing optimized for high RPM or peak power. This is especially appealing in tuned Fords, where the stock VVT range is too limiting, while the engine has already been modified. However, this is an extreme modification that will utterly ruin daily drivability. You will lose massive amounts of low-end torque, have a poor idle, and terrible fuel economy. This is a race-only mod. But some Fords have come into my shop with VVT solenoid failures, phaser rattle, or timing chain issues just because the VVT system aged or they skipped oil maintenance. When you disable the system, you should be careful to prevent any further issues. Furthermore, the VVT systems are part of the vehicle's emissions and efficiency controls. Like I said before, tampering with emissions is illegal in many states, and it will make your vehicle non-compliant with the emissions laws. The number 8 trick might seem crazy, but I've seen many customers who want to do this, and they achieve high performance in their Ford. The trick is to convert the auto to manual. This is one of the bold tricks that you'll hear about in the car scene. For a Ford that came in from the factory with an automatic transmission, you can remove the automatic gearbox, install a clutch pedal, manual gearbox, shifter, flywheel, and hydraulics, and then rewire or reprogram the ECU so the car behaves like a manual. The idea is that this gives you direct driver control and a better driving feel. It's worth noting that modern automatic transmissions are often more efficient than manuals, so the benefit is about driver engagement, not necessarily reduced power loss. A manual gearbox provides a more direct, engaging connection between the engine and wheels. For a performance-oriented Ford with a 5.0-liter Coyote V8, for example, going manual might give more feel and control for spirited driving. But this is only if you do it right. as this is very tricky. Some Fords have come into my shop tangled up in bad conversion jobs, leading to many problems like mismatched electronics, clutch issues, and drivability nightmares. Also, if you change the fundamental drivetrain system, that means you've altered the vehicle's registered specs. If discovered, you'll definitely end up in bureaucratic and potential legal trouble. Your Ford might no longer conform to its original emissions or safety certification, which can cause issues with insurance and registration. You also have to think about the practical complications. Modern Fords usually pair the engine, ECU, transmission, wiring, sensors, and chassis in a matched set. If you swap to manual, that means you will adapt or replace drive shafts, mounts, electronics, and pedal assemblies, all of which will be a major change. If the upgrade is sloppy, it can cause clutch wear, engine management trouble, false sensors, misalignment, or drive shaft issues. If you find a mechanic gutsy enough to convert your Ford from auto to manual, you might spend over $5,000. But if you do this wrong, you might deal with another $3,000 in bills, which is why you should ask for a professional to help. My final trick is to convert the air suspension for track use. If you swap out the factory suspension setup, like the leaf springs or coil springs, and then install adjustable air springs and a full air suspension system, you get adjustable ride height and load leveling. On a truck like the F-150 or an Explorer SUV, you can raise or lower the ride height, adjust stiffness or ride height for the track, and fine-tune handling. With an air suspension, you can drop the truck for better aerodynamics and a lower center of gravity, reduce the body roll, adjust the ride height for loading or towing, or raise it for off-road. If you have a heavy Ford with a powerful engine, like the 5.0-liter Coyote V8, you can make this mod to reduce squat, improve stability, and get more control when cornering. While a high-end air suspension can be capable, a purpose-built coilover suspension is generally superior for a pure track performance due to concerns about heat and reliability. This upgrade can help, but if you do it wrong, you can end up with poor performance. I've seen too many Fords come in with sagging suspension, worn leaf springs, or broken shackles because they didn't address the load and use case. Air suspensions look fancy, and they can help, but if it's done poorly, they can cause weird geometry, bad handling, or even failure mid-track. Furthermore, many states treat replacing key suspension components as vehicle conversion or modification during certification. So, if you drive a Ford with such a setup on public roads, you risk failing inspections and can lose insurance coverage or even pay fines. You should also get things done professionally for safety purposes. Air suspension systems will change how your suspension behaves, but if it's not engineered properly, you can end up with handling issues or failure. Still, if you decide to install an air suspension or conversion on a Ford truck, you can expect to spend over $4,000. It's important to remember that these tricks might be illegal under U.S. law or prohibited by Ford, and they carry significant risks. If you're thinking of making any of these upgrades, you might understand the legal and mechanical risks. Always do them right to avoid any further problems and to avoid serious legal or financial penalties. If you want more real advice for Ford owners, make sure to subscribe and check out my next video where I share 7 things that destroy your engine before 100,000 miles.